guys, welcome into the Up and Under podcast, the show dedicated to true basketball fans, giving you unfiltered and intellectual takes on the game we all love. If you like what you hear, consider subscribing to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, or wherever you can find a podcast. I'm your host Hani. Joined with me as always is Zeeshan.
Yo.
All right, man. Now we are in the conference finals, and pretty insane to think about. We're now down to 4 teams in the NBA season, and I mean, who would have thought we were repeating 2020?
Yeah, exactly. For everyone who was saying the bubble was a fake season, well, now we know it's the exact same teams there again.
Listen, man, this season really epitomizes history repeats itself because history is literally repeating itself as we speak. Now, will that mean that the Lakers will win the championship? Who knows? But we have the same conference finals matchup, so who knows what's going to happen. But we wanted to talk about 2 teams that were just recently eliminated from the second round of the playoffs in their respective conferences. Both teams, honestly, they had expectations to be in the conference finals or even be in the finals in some cases, and both of them flamed out in embarrassing fashions. And those 2 teams are the Philadelphia 76ers and the Phoenix Suns. So as we've been doing in our last few episodes, we've been answering the question, what's next for some of these eliminated playoff teams? So in this episode, we'll be answering the question, what's next for the Philadelphia 76ers and the Phoenix Suns? And again, both teams had championship expectations. Both teams had good rosters. Both teams have superstar level talent. Both teams just couldn't get it done.
And both teams just fired their coaches as a result.
Yeah, I mean, it's been absolute insanity for both these teams. So let's start off with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the Philadelphia 76ers finished the regular season with a 54-28 record, which was 3rd in the Eastern Conference. They were 4th in offensive rating, 8th in defensive rating, 3rd in net rating. They led the league in three-point percentage. They were 6th in field goal percentage. Their only really weak point was rebounding. They were 26th in rebounding. But, I mean, it was a pretty good year for the Sixers. They looked deeper than they were before. James Harden and Joel Embiid had relatively good seasons. I mean, Embiid won MVP for the first time in his career. James Harden led the league in assists. And again, they got some growth out of some of their guys. The guys like Tyrese Maxey took a big step forward in his game. They were deeper, as I mentioned earlier. And again, they really played like that throughout the regular season and even in round 1 of the playoffs. But once again, Joel Embiid faced injury concerns. He was not healthy during stretches of the regular season, though he was healthier than he has been in previous seasons. But he did get hurt in the playoffs again. And James Harden battled injuries again. He's clearly old. He's clearly a step slower than he used to be, even though he wasn't very athletic to begin with. And to be honest with you, they basically, that came to bite them in the second round, where they ended up losing to the Boston Celtics once again in the second round. They lost in Game 7. Despite having a 3-2 series lead, with a chance to close out the series at home in Philadelphia, they couldn't get it done. Boston was able to come back, and eventually the Celtics blew them out in Game 7. Embiid and Harden were basically no-shows. I mean, there's still APBs out for them. We have no idea where they've been at, but
it's not even a conversation who the best center in the league is anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
The conversation's done.
I mean, yeah, the best center in the league is still playing. Plain and simple.
Exactly.
Deserved MVP.
And dominating.
Oh, yes, and dominating for that matter. But Embiid and Harden, they didn't show up, although Embiid had the audacity to say that basketball is a team game and all this stuff. I'm sorry, man. You're making close to $50 million, man.
And I mean, the other, Tobias Harris outscored you. Tyrese Maxey outscored you. So, I mean, what's the conversation here?
Well, I mean, speaking of Maxey and Tobias Harris, I mean, the rest of the team couldn't do anything either. The depth couldn't do anything on both ends of the floor in crucial moments. I mean, Tyrese Maxey still gets the biggest pass because he's still young and he's still growing. But, man, can we just admit that Tobias Harris is overpaid? He's overpaid. He has not lived up to that contract. And again, you picked Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's playing in the conference finals, and you guys are in Cancun.
Jimmy has made it, 3 times since he left the 76ers?
Yep. And again, they chose Tobias Harris over him. Don't know what they were thinking, but it is what it is.
Shout out Elton Brand.
I guess shout out Elton Brand. And like I said, the bench, non-existent. And I looked at their bench stats for the playoffs. No one off their bench averaged more than 8 points a game. There's nobody off the Sixers bench in the playoffs that averaged more than 8 points a game. Again, you can't have that. And considering the fact that the Sixers were supposed to be a deeper team, they brought in specific guys like that. They brought in guys like Daniel House, Montrezl Harrell. They had some of these guys on their roster.
George Niang.
I mean, George Niang. I mean, we'll talk about him. He likes to score 4 points and yet hold the guy's knee when he's not even on the floor. I don't know what that was about. And then Scott Foster teased them both up.
Well,
Typical.
I mean, Jalen Brown's got rescinded.
Sure. Do you think Scott Foster really cares? No. The answer is no. But again, the depth was basically they weren't existent at all. And again, Doc Rivers once again got outcoached in a game 7 in a playoff series when the going got tough, when the situations actually mattered for adjustments and, tinkering and getting the most out of his players. Doc Rivers once again for the 10th time has failed to do so in a game 7. He has now lost 10 game 7s all time. And he's proven that he's not a playoff coach. He's not a playoff coach in today's game, um, which is the biggest reason why he got fired.
And the NBA has the audacity to have him as a top 10, top 15 coach of all time. Get out of here with that. Doc Rivers, first of all, he couldn't deal with the adjustment of the Boston Celtics putting in Robert Williams into the starting lineup. And it's embarrassing when you're a championship contender and essentially your only play for a whole game 7 is James Harden and Embiid pick and roll. That was the only play they had. It seemed like everyone else would just stand there and watch Joel Embiid and James Harden run pick and roll. How is that your playbook in a game 7 of the second round?
And listen, this is not to excuse Harden and Embiid for their performances or lack thereof, for that matter. But let's be honest with you. We have seen it time and time again with Doc Rivers teams. They're either not ready for the moment, they don't show up, they don't make adjustments when needed, and they always lose in the big moments. We've seen it now time and time again with multiple different teams. This is no longer a new thing with Doc Rivers. Again, I can agree he's a very nice guy, he's a very likable guy, very respectable guy. A lot of players would like to play for him.
He's a floor raiser.
Yes, he's a floor raiser. But listen, man, in terms of the Sixers, they need to reach their ceiling, not their floor. They need to get to an NBA championship, and they had a roster and a player caliber to do it, and they didn't get the job done. So again, the Sixers, after a pretty promising regular season, a very disappointing end to their postseason. Bringing us into their notable free agents heading into their offseason, and this is where things get very interesting for the Philadelphia 76ers. First and foremost, James Harden, again, APB is still out for him. He has a player option for for next season worth about $35.6 million. And remember all that talk about him, thinking that, oh, I want to stay in Philly and all that stuff. Yeah, this is why you never take a superstar's, word at face value anymore in today's NBA, because now all the reports are pointing that James Harden is most likely going to opt out. He's most likely going to leave the Sixers. And to be honest with you, I think for the Sixers, I mean, they invested they didn't really invest all that much into getting James Harden, but losing him for nothing would absolutely suck. Especially when they got literally zero return for James Harden. So yeah, James Harden's got his player option. He's probably gonna opt out of it. George Niang is an unrestricted free agent. I would not bring this guy back at all. This guy is a complete waste of a player. He is a defensive negative, and offensively, if this guy is not hitting threes, what is he? He's just a black hole, I think. I mean, the only thing he's good at is, I guess, holding somebody's knee when he's on the bench. So he's an unrestricted free agent. Daniel House, player option, $4.4 million. I wouldn't even be surprised if he picks it up because he had a pretty poor season, despite coming off of a pretty promising campaign with the Utah Jazz that earned him an opportunity to come to Philly. Yeah, like, I don't know. Maybe somebody will pay Daniel House, but
I mean, he had his one moment in the playoffs. I think it was game 6 or game 5, where he scored like 10 points in a quarter or whatever it was. But yeah, aside from that, Daniel House is kind of being disappointing, and that's what we talk about when we mean like Doc Rivers teams getting the most out of their players has never really been a thing.
yeah. And speaking of another player that has failed to reach their potential is Montrezl Harrell. I mean, this is a guy that went from a six man of the year type of candidate when he was with the Clippers. To now, I mean, this guy can barely stay on the floor. I mean, he has a player option worth 2.7 million. Once again, I wouldn't be surprised if he opts into it. But again, he was basically unplayable in stretches. He's heavily undersized. He can't space the floor. In today's game, he's very hard to play, especially in playoff matchups.
Oh, I mean, Dwayne Dedman was playing over him. That's when you know it's bad. Dwayne Dedman. Shout out to Dwayne Dedman because he was actually a solid player in his prime. But like, yo, if Dwayne Dedman at this stage of his career is playing over you, that's a real issue.
And speaking of Dwayne Dedman, he's also an unrestricted free agent. Doubtful he comes back to Philly. I think Dwayne Dedman might try to hop onto another contender, and maybe try to win a championship himself. So he's an unrestricted free agent. Jalen McDaniels, they brought him in to be a defensive guy. I mean, I don't think anyone on the Sixers really were able to play defense, because Jason Tatum literally cooked them in that game 7. So
Not to mention the offensive struggles from.
exactly, like it's one thing like it's basically Matisse Thybulle 2.0. I mean, like you can't have a guy who's so great on one end but literally a negative on the other end. Like it kind of offsets. So I don't know. They could bring him back. They could not. I mean, he's still young, so maybe they will bring him back for cheap. But yeah, not a great look. Shake Milton is another unrestricted free agent on the team. This guy showed a lot of promise in his early time with Philly, but again, can't really play much defense. And when the shot's not falling, he isn't really effective.
And not to mention the chemistry issues. I feel like a lot of the success he had early on kind of went to his head, and we saw him, for example, just not really caring about what his teammates are doing. Him kind of playing selfish basketball a lot of the times on the court, and as a result, he got benched a lot of times. Because, I mean, who wants to play with a guy like that? Right? So, I mean, yeah, I don't see him coming back, to be honest.
Yeah. So the Sixers, I mean, the good news about the Sixers free agents is that they can free up some money to go and make some moves. But basically, after next season, now nobody's really signed on the team, so it's gonna be interesting to see what they do for the future. Except Joel Embiid, of course, he's signed long term. But yeah, so those were the notable free agents heading into the offseason. Now let's get into some of what do the Sixers actually need. Now, first and foremost, they need a new head coach, and I think we've said this now for a bunch of teams because this has literally been the offseason of coaches firings. Um, but yeah, they need a new coach, and I think they need somebody who can win in the postseason, somebody proven, somebody who can clearly make those adjustments that the Sixers under Doc Rivers and Brett Brown clearly could not make. And again, they need to also get the most out of guys on top of Embiid. Like you can't get Embiid playing at MVP level during the regular season and everyone else kind of just coasting, or even in the postseason rely upon Joel Embiid for everything and have literally everyone be negatives on the court. So they need a guy to bring a sort of a balance in that. Some of the names that the Sixers are looking at are Nick Nurse, Monty Williams, Mike Budenholzer, among others. I mean, I think I've heard Frank Vogel's name, Mike D'Antoni, which I don't know why, but he's an option as well. Um, and again, I don't see the Nick Nurse thing really working in Philly. I just think Nick Nurse expects a lot of his players, and if he's having an injury riddled player like Embiid, I just don't think it'll work for him. Monty seems more interesting to me. I think he has a connection with Philly. He's coached there before. The players know him, that they respect him. He could be interesting, but I think it might even just end up being someone like Mike Budenholzer, to be honest with you. Which again doesn't solve their playoff problem because Mike Budenholzer has his own. But in terms of resetting the culture, he might not be a bad option for the team. So, but getting a new coach, 100% has to be priority number one for the Sixers. The second thing that they absolutely have to do in this offseason is get rid of Tobias Harris. Get rid of that contract. Like, I'm sorry. He's now on an expiring deal. He has not lived up to the contract at all. Once again, you chose Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler. What were you thinking? That's like I don't understand. Like looking back, like I know hindsight is 2020, but come on, man. We all could have made a better decision on that one. And plus, the Sixers need the cap space. They need cap space to make other moves. They got to pay Tyrese Maxey eventually. Potentially, they got to go get another superstar. So, getting out of the Tobias Harris deal is a huge priority in my opinion. And like I said, they need another superstar. They need another player who can truly complement Embiid because Harden's basically on his way out of Philly. Harden's also old, and it's not really as good of a long term fit as you would want it to be. You know, you can always think of guys like Damian Lillard, potentially Kyrie Irving. You know, I was thinking like Fred Van Vliet or even Chris Middleton would also be great options to go after, because you will have the cap space to kind of make those moves. But yeah, they need another star, and I think the Sixers need better depth pieces. Ideally, they want guys who can spread the floor for Embiid, but also defend. Now the Sixers need basically an entire new bench, so they have options, so they can like kind of pick and choose who they want. But yeah, they definitely need better and more reliable depth, especially to go on deeper postseason runs. And the last thing I think the Sixers really need, they need Embiid to stay healthy. Like I know we've said this time and time again with Joel Embiid, but you just won an MVP and got bounced in the second round. Like and where you were a no show. Like your health has to be something that you need to improve upon.
And he's been essentially the only MVP. I think I saw the stat there. He's the only MVP who's never made it to the conference finals.
Bro, his points per game dropped from 33 in the regular season to 23 in the playoffs. I think that's one of the largest drop offs from regular season to playoffs in NBA history, which is insane. And he won an MVP. So I don't know. Like Joel's got to be better. In terms of the draft, the Sixers obviously have no picks because they traded them all away. But I mean, they don't really need to worry about the draft anyways for where they're at. Now, in terms of potential moves, I think the first potential move they have to make is trading Tobias Harris for multiple pieces. And the one comparable comparison I can make is to what do something similar to what the Lakers did with Russell Westbrook's contract. Trade away that big contract for multiple pieces, multiple like, role players that don't cost as much, but skill can give you value. I mean, look at what happened with the Lakers. They turned a $40 million Russell Westbrook contract into D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jaden McDaniels. Like,
Jared Vanderbilt.
oh, sorry, and Jared Vanderbilt. Sorry, uh, that was a very good move for the Lakers, and look how well it's helped them in their deep playoff run. The Sixers got to do something similar with the Tobias Harris contract. I'd also say, like I mentioned earlier, sign or trade for another superstar player to pair with Embiid. Either it's Damian Lillard, although I don't know how you make that work. Maybe Tobias Harris' contract can play a role into that, but the Sixers have no picks. But Damian Lillard, like I said, Fred Van Vliet might be an interesting option to explore. Chris Middleton, I actually really liked when I was talking with like Zeeshan when we were making our notes, just because with him, Maxey, and Embiid, it kind of seems like it would be a good combination. And then the most wild card option that I wanted to throw out there was Kyrie Irving. Like, I know Kyrie and Embiid would be such a wild, like newsworthy, move pairing, but man, I think he would fit very well with Joel. I think the pick and roll would be nasty, and if those two play, man, they'd be pretty good
I
together.
mean, in terms of Kyrie, his on-court fit, I don't think has ever been an issue in most of his teams. Maybe not Dallas, I guess, but like the on-court fit has never been an issue for most of his teams, right? It's just everything else that comes with it.
Yeah. I mean, and Kyrie's also from the New York area, so maybe being closer back there might not be a bad option for him. But yeah, I was just thinking Kyrie. Now, in terms of potential free agents, they can sign for the depth. They can obviously go back and try to get Seth Curry once again. He was on their team. He had some success in Philly. They know the players, so they could go back and get him. Jordan Clarkson, again, he's a notorious 6-man player, but he will give you buckets off your bench. He'll be a scoring option for you. You can go after maybe like a younger player like Karis LeVert, who might not get as many minutes in Cleveland, but might get more minutes in Philly. That might be a way to entice him to come over. Um, the name that we've been bringing up in every single one of these episodes is Mason Plumlee because, again, he just would work for on any team. And the last option would be Dylan Brooks, just because again you can bring that defense, that toughness, and I think he'll be very loved in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think he would. I think he would.
I
I
think
think he fits right in.
I think he'll be an instant fan favorite there. But overall, man, the Sixers they desperately need to figure out how to win and how to win soon because the clock is ticking and Joel Embiid isn't getting younger and he isn't getting any healthier. So you have to figure, and the Eastern Conference is only getting better. So you have to figure out how to make this work now, basically. But we'll see what happens with the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, moving on to the Phoenix Suns and what's next for them. They finished 45 and 37 this season, good for fourth in the Western Conference. Now the team did not start off well. They did not start off on the right foot. coming off of their embarrassing postseason loss last season against the Dallas Mavericks. We know the DeAndre Ayton situation from day one it was not off to a good start. You know, first day of training camp, the media asked him, "What have you and Monty talked about to kind of smooth things over?" And he says that him and Monty have not talked for the whole offseason.
Listen, I'll say this about DeAndre Ayton. He he got Monty fired. Like let's just put it out there. He got Monty Williams fired. But also the standpoint, like this guy is a big baby. Like you cry for your money, but yet you are literally watching Nikola Jokic get 3 offensive rebounds in a playoff game. Like if you're talking about a guy who literally quit and threw a tantrum, I would say it's DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, man, he hasn't been good. Especially since I think
And he got his
he
money.
he he I think expected that he wasn't coming back to Phoenix either, and he did end up coming back to Phoenix. So I think that really threw a monkey wrench into his plans as well. In terms of the Phoenix Suns as a whole, they were inconsistent throughout the season. At one point they were looking like a playing team until they rattled off like a whole bunch of wins. Where Mikal Bridges I think was going crazy. Cam Johnson I think was injured.
Yeah.
But Mikal Bridges, Damian Lee hit that one game winner against Golden State, I think was it. And this was, I think, without Devin Booker as well. So it was an impressive run for sure that kind of essentially saved the Phoenix Suns season. Um, Speaking of Devin Booker and CP3, they were kind of injured throughout the season. Devin Booker, when he was on the court, was very good, as we saw, especially in the playoffs. But that was kind of a reoccurring problem for them, especially CP3. However, the team essentially completely transformed after the KD trade, where they went all into the season and in future seasons for a championship, and essentially sacrificed their future to do so. I think a lot of that probably has to do with the new ownership in Matt Ishbia, but they made their move, and they made it a one-directional move. So we know what their direction is now moving forward, and they really went all in for it.
Well, I mean they went all in, but like at what cost? And I think you'll get into that in a bit, but yeah, that trade I think changed the whole landscape of the league.
I mean, they have a very good starting lineup for sure. If everyone stays on the court, but aside from that, it's a very flawed team.
We called it because they gave up huge depth pieces in order to make this happen. And they were already slightly thinner than they were in previous seasons. So that only compounded to their issues.
They were essentially very too reliant on their main two scorers, which was Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, especially after CP3 went out with injury in the playoffs. And you lack that kind of playmaker. It just everything fell on Devin Booker and KD. I think they were the highest scoring duo, maybe in like a long time or something like that. They were up there in terms of like playoff records for highest scoring duos. And the fact that they were eliminated in the second round shows how much they were actually kind of backpacking on offense,
And they
especially.
got blown out at home court again in the closeout game.
Well, I mean, which is what I was coming to. It got even worse for them in the playoffs, where essentially if the two guys weren't scoring, they were not winning. Especially Devin Booker, they needed a historic run from Devin Booker to be able to keep up in that series, because nobody else on the team was essentially doing anything. You have your third star, quote unquote, DeAndre Ayton getting benched for Jock Landale, right?
And Landale
So
played better.
Landale was nice, man. Credit to Jock Landale, man. He's a nice player. I like him. But if you have your third star in DeAndre Ayton getting benched for Jock Landale, that's not a good thing. They also have a weird issue of being too reliant on the mid range, which is interesting to say, especially with how much we preach the mid range in the playoffs and how good of a option it is for the playoffs. They have a weird tendency to rely too much on it. I'll name you some stats right now. 27th in free throw attempts and 26th in free throws, and 17th in 3-point attempts and 13th in 3 pointers. So clearly they had an issue with not getting enough threes and then not getting to the line enough. And that's indicative, I think, of kind of what the play style of Kevin Durant is at this stage of his career, and kind of who Devin Booker has always been in terms of never being really able to get to the line like that either. Yeah, in the playoffs, CP3, as I mentioned, got injured again. DeAndre Ayton basically didn't want to play half the time. And Kevin Durant, Devin Booker got absolutely annihilated by the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic, especially in that last game where they got blown out once again, essentially in the
On
first
home
half.
court.
On home court. They did it again 2 years in a row, which is why Monty Williams ended up getting fired. I think after 2 years of doing that, you probably have to fire the coach. But I think it's just not a good situation overall.
I disagree because the Monty Williams firing was half political, like or half like like internal politics, versus like him actually deserving to get fired. Like he didn't get a full season with this team. He wasn't given depth. Like his team basically got completely changed midway through the year, and that wasn't his call to make. So, and I think he did the best with what he could. I mean, it's not his fault that one of his guys quit on the team in DeAndre Ayton. His veteran point guard is always hurt in the playoffs. Like I think he did the best with what he had, man. Like, um, I would have given him at least next season to see what he can do with the full season with KD and Booker. But yeah, this was basically Matt Ishbia saying that he wasn't my guy, and that Monty fell in a victim to that
And now
circumstance.
this leaves them in a really bad situation with DeAndre Ayton wanting out. CP3's basically getting older, and now you have a huge decision with what to do with him. Um, and now you basically have no depth, and you kind of have no future. So it leaves you in a very precarious position.
Well, you have to win now. You have to figure out how to do it now.
Exactly. In terms of the notable free agents, Chris Paul and Campaign aren't free agents, but they are on partially guaranteed deals right now, which essentially serves as trade options, I think. And in terms of the rest of their depth, everyone else is unrestricted free agent. Torrey Craig, Bismack Biyombo, Damian Lee, Okogie, TJ Warren, Jock Lando, and Terrence Ross are all unrestricted free agents. So you basically have your top guys who are getting paid $30, $40 million and nobody else on the team. So you have a huge hole right now. I think the first thing you got to figure out is what you really want to do with the CP3. In terms of his trade and what possible trade options. I think you got to get a young point guard in there. CP3. The problem is how do you get that young point guard in there? CP3 does not really have much trade value at this stage of his career.
I mean, you could trade out CP3 because again, if you don't guarantee the remaining of his contract, that's a $15 million deal. You can flip it for draft picks and then go after maybe a younger point guard, maybe like a Fred VanVleet, who they've been reportedly interested in. That might work, but again, it's like that's if things can kind of go well moving that CP3 deal.
I mean, the other option is you just deal with having CP3 there for now, and then you just run Campaign or another potential point guard off the bench.
I mean, he dropped a 30 piece, but
He was their best player in the elimination game, that's for sure.
they lost by 30. So
I mean, I think that's the other option. You just kind of deal with it for now and then see what you can do with KD and Devin Booker leading the team. The next thing they got to do is trade DeAndre Ayton. This guy clearly dogged it in the playoffs, especially like he doesn't want to be on the team. The only problem with no matter how much we drag on Ayton, the problem is for the Phoenix Suns, how do you get better after you trade him?
you don't.
That's essentially the issue because no matter how much we want to crap on DeAndre Ayton, he is a top 10 center in the league.
Unless you find like a mutual situation where like another star wants out, like kind of make a trade that way. But honestly, I think he had more beef with Monty. So I think now that Monty's gone, maybe Matt Ishbia can kind of convince DeAndre to stay and want to stay. It depends on who they bring in as the next guy. But yeah, either explore options of getting rid of him, but you can't expect to get better.
You also need to hire a new coach who's going to be able to get the most out of his team in the playoffs, especially in terms of adjustments and whatnot. Now, Monty Williams was a great locker room guy, but even going back to his time in New Orleans, he's never been known as a great, playoff performer. So I think you need to consider who to get in there to kind of take you to that next level. Now, they have been rumored with essentially everyone else on the market, all the candidates on the market. I think Ty Lue is the specific one for them that I haven't heard mentioned for other teams. Ty Lue,
Because he's more difficult to get out of that situation. Like I think they'd have to give up compensation if he
Exactly.
wants to go there. It's a whole ordeal to get Ty Lue.
But aside from that, it's all the regular names. Frank Vogel's now making his way into the headlines. Doc
Why?
Rivers, Nick Nurse,
Why?
Budenholzer, and of course Kevin Young is on the bench. Honey talked about him last episode.
I
as
really
well.
like Kevin Young. I think he's a good candidate for most jobs.
Yeah, so I mean they're linked to all these guys. I think they'll end up getting one because there's like 20 spots on the market, it seems like right now. So I think all of these guys are gonna end up getting a job somewhere.
Listen, we've seen player free agency and how insane it gets, but this year coaching free agency, man, that thing is heating up. Man.
I think this is the greatest coaching free agency I've ever seen.
And there's a lot of good candidates out there. Maybe not Frank Vogel and Doc Rivers, but There's a lot of good candidates out there.
You also have depth issues that you really need to address. I just mentioned how you basically have no players on the team aside from your core guys. Um, the starting lineup is incomplete. You really need that shooting guard, or slash power forward. That last guy in terms of DeAndre Ayton, CP3, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. Who's that fifth guy? They've been running Landry Shamet. They've had campaign in the lineup, but it's just a
Yeah.
revolving door. You don't have enough guys. Torrey Craig, you need someone who's going to stabilize the position. I think it really hurts them if they don't have that. Um, Problem is, again, you're already over the cap. They need some more defense, especially after trading away a DPOY candidate and Mikal Bridges. You
Well, they
don't
traded
have that.
both their best defenders basically in Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. So they have to recoup somebody who can play
And
defense.
I was talking about their mid-range issue, or their reliance on mid-range before. They really need some kind of downhill attackers on the team. CP3 can't do that anymore. KD and Devin Booker are kind of mid-range players, so you need that kind of downhill threat. They were 29th in 2-point percentage and 23rd in field goal percentage, which indicates not enough easy shots. Now, ideally, DeAndre Ayton should be able to make up some of that, but we know this guy's soft as hell in the post. Like, this guy does not want any contact in the post. So you need a guy who can get downhill, who can cut through the defense for you, and especially being able to kick it out to guys like Devin Booker and KD. In terms of their draft picks, they have the 2023 second this year, but again, their
Who
draft
cares?
situation it's complicated right now. Some potential moves. I think any potential moves that they make in terms of any big signings or trades would have to involve CP3's contract for sure, and then also possibly DeAndre Ayton's, maybe in like a package, like in a 3-4 team deal. I think that would probably be the situation in order for them to get better. I don't see how else they get better without involving at least one of those guys in a trade.
You think New York would trade would flip Julius Randle to Phoenix
That would be
for
pretty
Aiden?
interesting. I think that would be a very interesting deal. The question is who New York would want for that. Because I mean, if you get DeAndre Ayton is better than Mitchell Robinson, but Mitchell Robinson has proved his worth. I think.
But Jalen Brunson
But
and Aiton, I mean that looks kind of good on paper.
I mean, again,
Now,
third team maybe third team might be able to solve New York's problems.
maybe.
But yeah, I think that would be a very interesting proposition. In terms of some trade candidates, DeJounte Murray and Yusuf Nurkic have both been kind of in the rumor mill. DeJounte Murray has one more year on his contract, and the fit between him and Trae Young has not really been that seamless. So I think, maybe you can potentially go after him to kind of replace CP3. Yusuf Nurkic, I guess, in the case that you let DeAndre Ayton go, he could be a stopgap. Um,
I mean,
yeah.
Portland would be interested in Aiton as someone who can work the pick and roll with Lillard, but I just don't see why the Suns would go from Aiton to Nurkic.
And now we have three, I think, big names at the guard positions. We have Kyrie Irving, Fred VanVleet, and James Harden. Now, as Hani mentioned, James Harden's on a player option, so is Fred VanVleet. Both guys are probably expected to opt out. Kyrie's an unrestricted free agent. Any of these guys, obviously, like I mentioned, you'd have to have CP3 involved in the deal somehow, sign and trades or whatever it is. But I think any of these guys, going to the Phoenix Suns would be very, very interesting.
I think Fred is the most reliable guy that you can think of in terms of like he's younger than both of the Harden and Kyrie.
Is he younger than Kyrie?
He's younger than Kyrie.
Hmm.
Kyrie's like what above 30, right? Yeah, Kyrie's above 30. Fred's like what 28, 29. So yeah, and Harden's 33. I don't see James Harden going to Phoenix. I think if James if Kyrie teams up with KD again, then it's KD's fault. Like it's all KD's fault. But yeah, so I think Fred seems like the most likely, but you got to make the money work. I don't know how you do that.
Another point guard, I think that could be interesting. The problem is like he's not gonna replace CP3.
No.
Is Derrick Rose? He's also he has a team option. He hasn't really played for the New York Knicks this year. Obviously with Deuce McBride and Grimes and stuff coming up in the rotation. Derrick Rose, in terms of if you want a downhill attacker, now he's not really attacking the rim like that anymore, but he does provide you with that playmaking. He provides you a steady hand. He can get to the basket on occasion. I think him coming to a team is in a situation where CP3 is gone. You need like I mentioned with someone else, Yusuf Nurkic. It's like stopgap option in the case of trades happening.
He's a good vet to have. Like, but again, he's not going to give you much in the defensive end, and who knows how his health situation is going to hold up.
I think another name that could potentially bring a lot of value in the case of a DeAndre Ayton trade is Clint Capella. He's also an unrestricted free agent. Now, he would demand a contract for sure, but he's also a very good player and who I think could fit well with KD and Devin Booker. And if CP3 is still there, running pick and roll with CP3.
Lob threat.
Yeah, so he provides you that defense, rebounding threat. He provides you more physicality than DeAndre Ayton gave you. So I think Clint Capella is possibly good option. And then two guys, Jock Landale, bringing him back, I think is a good option for Phoenix Suns. He played well for Phoenix. I think he's just a good glue guy off the bench to have. Hamidou Diallo is an interesting young player who's kind of shown flashes throughout the league, throughout his time in the league, but he can profile kind of as a defender, improving offense. I mean, similar to, I think, what the hope maybe for a guy like Darius Bazley was on this team. But, Hamidou Diallo, I think low risk, semi-high reward maybe if you're the Phoenix Suns.
I mean, it's good to have a body. You can play him. So he's had played NBA minutes. So, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to it. You can kind of sign him to a cheap deal.
I think my final takeaway for the Phoenix Suns going forward is I think they're kind of screwed. I think they're in a very bad position where I'm not saying they're going to fall off the face of the earth or like they're going to miss the playoffs or anything. I think they'll be there. They'll get wins. They'll be around a semifinals team again. I don't doubt the fact that they can make a big run, but I don't them winning a championship. I don't see it with this group, with this team.
I think if they can't get it done next season, I will have to really admit that Kevin Durant is washed and he's no longer the same after his injury, because he can no longer carry a team anymore. I don't know if he ever could carry a team by himself, but he clearly can't do it anymore.
I mean, Chuck said he was a bus rider, not a bus driver.
I mean, it might even be true.
I mean, considering what you have,
the evidence is there.
Steph Curry is the bus driver. Steph Curry was clearly the bus driver. KD was the best player, but Steph Curry was the bus driver, and we've seen that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, but the Suns are the classic case of a new owner who is desperate to win right away.
Mark
right
Cuban
now.
2.0.
Pretty much, but you can see what happened to Mark Cuban, so it might happen to Matt Ishbia too.
I mean, Cuban got a ring out of it though, so
we'll see what happens. Let's see if Matt Ishbia can get a ring, but they have a lot of decisions to make. But we'll see what happens with both the Sixers and the Suns. Obviously, both have many decisions to come in the offseason. Bringing us into a short up and under segment for this week. First and foremost, are you up or under on the Ja Morant situation 2.0? Actually, what are we at? Like the situation number 5 or something like that? God knows how many things this guy has been into. But once again, this guy was seen on IG Live flashing a gun. This time it was on his boy's IG Live. And for the life of me, I just don't understand. The gun was over here off camera. He decided to purposely bring it on camera.
Because he wants to show, man. Again, what did
and the Grizzlies have now suspended him from all team activities for now, and he's probably facing a lengthy suspension come next season.
Yeah,
so
he's probably going to get suspended for a minute. John, what did Kwame Brown called him? NBA dumb boy. He said John Morant likes listening to NBA young boy, so he's NBA dumb boy. But yeah, man, like. At this point, like, what do you do with this guy? Like, first of all, we know you're not fooling anybody. You're not a guy, okay? Like, let's be real. Especially, like, you're doing this in Memphis, man. Memphis, of all places.
No, yes,
everyone knows you're not about that guy.
Tennessee is a free carry state, so technically he hasn't broken any laws, but
no. But I'm saying about Memphis, bro. Memphis, especially, fam.
Yeah.
You're not fooling anybody in Memphis, bro. Go to actual Memphis, bro. You'll see what they're about. You're not that guy, okay? Like, everyone knows that. You're an NBA player. And what's wrong with that, man? You're making millions. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So, this guy trying to be, like, a thug man and stuff, like, bro, stop it, okay?
And the thing is, like, it's a repeat offense. Like, not only, like, it hasn't even been, like, 3 months yet, man. You faced an 8-game suspension. You talked to Adam Silver face-to-face, and you told the guy, nah, I'm going to change. Like, imagine Adam Silver coming out last night on the draft lottery and having to be like, it was quite surprising because the guy literally told me to my face that he said he wasn't gonna do it, and he
Adam
did it
Silver
again.
basically said that John lied to his face.
Pretty much, and like, it's just plain stupidity, man. And I know guys like JJ Redick were questioning like, oh, why are we coming down so hard on a 23-year-old? It's the reality is that the NBA has to set a precedence. Otherwise, this is going to encourage repeat behavior from multiple other players, and so if you have to come down hard on the first guy that does it, and it happens to be Ja.
Not to mention his Chat GPT apology, man. I don't know if you saw that or not, but bro, he released an apology statement. It was literally Chat GPT, bro. Somebody literally made it. Somebody literally asked ChatGPT to make the apology and came out exactly the same. So this guy literally wrote a ChatGPT apology. He couldn't even make an actual apology. Like, come on, man. I don't know, bro. I'm over this guy, man. This guy's
He's screwing his own career up, man, by keeping on messing up like this.
Next up, are you up or under on San Antonio winning the draft lottery? Now Charlotte got the second pick. Portland got a third pick. I think Houston got fourth, and of course Detroit got screwed by getting the fifth pick. So. Spurs are gonna get Victor Wembanyama. Are you up or under?
I'm up on it, man. Listen, bro. We said it from last offseason. The Spurs committed to this tank from last offseason. If there's any team that committed harder, it's the Spurs. We knew from that jump, we're like, all right, they're trying to get Wemby, and they ended up getting it.
Spurs strike again, man.
And
they did it again.
Listen, they did it again, but for Wembanyama, wouldn't this not be this is probably the best case scenario. You're going to a stable organization, potentially going to be coached by Greg Popovich, who's coached Hall of Famers in David Robertson, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker, a fellow French nationalist. Like,
well, I mean, he played for Tony Parker in France.
Like, you played for Tony Parker. Like, dude, this couldn't be best. Like, couldn't even. This is best case scenario for Wembanyama, and I'm happy for him. I'm happy with the Spurs. Congrats to them. Because again, they worked hard, but they didn't go the route of Detroit when being completely terrible. They were still competent, and they have some nice pieces. Pairing Wembanyama with that, it's gonna be pretty impressive. But Portland, I think, were the real winners, jumping up to the third spot. Now more likely they're gonna trade the pick, but hey, it's a good opportunity for them to get some good value out of that pick. So yeah, I'm up on it. And lastly, are you up or under on Draymond Green saying that the punch that he gave to Jordan Poole filled the team with tension all season long?
I mean, I'm up on it in the
No
sense
shit.
that obviously, bro, like it
ruined the guy out.
It ruined the team since day one, man. And again, we can listen. Jordan Poole did not play good. He was terrible. Okay, but at the same time, how do you expect a guy to give his whole effort or play at 100% of his potential when you have a guy sitting right there? And not to mention, I think the thing that made it worse is how the Warriors themselves handled it, right? The Warriors didn't do anything to Draymond. They didn't suspend him. They didn't do nothing.
Because he's too valuable to them.
And Steve Kerr and everyone's reaction wasn't to say, oh, Draymond is wrong, blah, blah. The first thing they said was, oh, why is this video out? Why is the video out?
I mean, true, but also, listen, there's two ways to look at it. Number one, Draymond shouldn't have punched a guy like that. The second thing is Jordan Poole shouldn't have mouthed it off like that. Like, it's on both guys. Like, we can't just pin all the blame on Draymond. Jordan Poole had to have said something to piss off Draymond. We don't know what exactly he said, nor does it really matter. But Jordan Poole, I think, we said it when it happened. He probably was feeling himself. He probably went up to... Again, Draymond Green's a 4-time NBA champion. He's more valuable on that team than Jordan Poole has ever been. You can't be disrespecting the man like that, and he paid it. Now, should Draymond have done it? Absolutely not. But yeah, it definitely did play a factor in the chemistry with the team. So
it definitely ruined the team this year for sure.
It is, but I mean, Draymond's probably on his way out of Golden State. More all likelihood.
I don't know.
I mean,
we'll have to see.
I mean, we'll see what happens, but I don't know how you keep him. But yeah, with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and of course on YouTube. Definitely subscribe if you want more great content from us in the future. Follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at _N_podcast. Follow us there. We do post reactionary clips to some breaking news. We have done some breakdowns on some of the conference finals matchups, and we've also done some quick reactions on some of the recent coaches firings. So definitely check those out if you haven't done so. And lastly, check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we write blog posts with every single episode. If you don't have time to listen or watch the full thing, you can read about it on our website. Every episode is posted with the video, audio, and the written version all in one place. So definitely check that out if you haven't already done so. And yeah, man, we are in the conference finals. I believe the East finals are starting tonight. It's getting pretty exciting. We're guaranteed a new NBA champion this year, which is very exciting.
Yeah, man,
Uh,
these playoffs were great, man.
these playoffs have absolutely been incredible. But with that, that concludes this week's episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.